Welcome to the Explainer. So, with the World Cup expanding to 48 teams, we're not just looking at a larger tournament here. We're literally looking at the ultimate tactical battlefield. We're stepping right into an arena where the age-old philosophy of overwhelming attacking flair is set to collide head-on with gritty, unbreakable defensive solidity. Today, we're tearing down the bracket and digging into the tactical data that's going to define our next world champion. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the roadmap. We'll frame the 48-team battlefield, profile the masters of defensive solidity, and contrast them with the powerhouses of attacking flair. After that, we'll solve the puzzle of the low block, simulate some knockout clashes, and finally, reveal our ultimate predicted champion.
Section 1. The 48-team tactical battlefield.
To actually predict a winner at this massive scale, we've got to look way past casual predictions and zero in on the tactical data. 48. That is the magic number here. With 48 teams entering the fray, the initial group stages might seem, well, a little bit diluted compared to the brutal groups of death we've seen in the past. Like, think back to that legendary 1962 tournament with Brazil, Czechoslovakia, Spain, and Mexico all crammed into one 24-team bracket. But hey, don't let the expanded format fool you. While the early rounds might afford a little breathing room, the ultimate victor of this tournament, that's going to be decided entirely by elite tactical supremacy.
So the really crucial thing to grasp is how these heavyweights actually categorize strategically. You can take these top-tier contenders and pretty distinctly separate them into three operational philosophies. We've got our defensive pragmatists, teams like Ecuador and the Netherlands, who prioritize shape and absolute discipline. Then we have our attacking juggernauts, like France and Spain, who just overwhelm you with depth. And finally, there are the balanced, highly tactical squads like Portugal and England. This massive clash of styles, that's the underlying narrative that's going to define the whole shebang.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Masters of Defensive Solidity.
Let's look really closely at the defensive walls. The teams that rely on these unbreakable structures to just suffocate their opponents and grind out deep tournament runs. Now notice the number 5 here. Ecuador has conceded only 5 goals in their last 18 matches. I mean, wow, that is an absolutely phenomenal defensive record. Honestly, they are a proper, terrifying dark horse in this tournament simply because breaking them down is nearly impossible.
And this mastery at the back has fueled an incredible run. Get this, they have literally not lost a single game since a narrow 1-goal defeat to Brazil way back in 2024. Actually, by relying so heavily on this defensive solidity, they managed to finish above Brazil in the qualifying rounds. It absolutely proves that a highly organized, gritty defense can consistently outperform teams with arguably way more individual star power.
Now contrast Ecuador's rising momentum with the Netherlands. On paper, the Dutch boast a fortress-like defense and a remarkably tight midfield. However, that elite defensive structure kind of masks a surprisingly lukewarm attack. They're missing the historic firepower of past legends. There's no new Van Basten, Bergkamp, Van Persie, or Van Nistelrooy up top to reliably finish the chances their solid foundation creates. It's a textbook example of a world-class defensive structure compensating for offensive shortcomings.
Which brings us to Section 3, Powerhouses of Attacking Flair. So, what happens when you completely flip the script? Let's enthusiastically shift our focus to the exact opposite side of the tactical spectrum, the teams wielding sheer, unadulterated offensive dominance. 314. That is nearly an entire calendar year. France has gone an astounding 314 days without a single loss. And the crazy thing? They haven't done it by parking the bus. Nope. They've done it by simply outgunning absolutely every opponent that steps onto the pitch with them.
And this brilliant attacking depth, it's essentially a barrage of continuous weaponry. I mean, look at this. With a squad loaded with the likes of Mbappe, Barcola, Olise, and Cherki, France possesses easily the most ridiculously stacked roster in the world right now. They have the capability to visually and physically overwhelm any defensive line out there, purely through the sheer volume and depth of their attacking options. They just don't stop coming at you, ever.
Honestly, the only team operating on a similar attacking frequency is Spain, who are sitting on an unbelievable 311-day unbeaten streak of their own. But here's a fascinating caveat from the source analysis. Spain's streak is only technically shorter than France's because Spain actually beat France just 3 days before the French streak even began. Talk about fine margins, right? These are two offensive juggernauts operating at the absolute peak of international football.
Which brings us to the ultimate tactical dilemma. What actually happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Like, how do you actually break down a team that absolutely refuses to leave their defensive shell?
Let's dive into that in Section 4,
overcoming the low block.
Portugal serves as our absolute prime case study here, for a team engineered to solve the puzzle of a deep, entrenched defensive setup. The answer? Well, it lies right in the middle of the park. Our source material points out that Portugal boasts easily the best midfield trio in international football. This is the exact engine that recently won them the Nations League. Because when opponents drop all their players deep into their own penalty area, a classic low block, you need precise, creative, and relentless midfield maestros to pick the lock. And Portugal, they finally have the exact tools necessary to dismantle those stubborn defensive structures.
But hey, creating chances is only half the battle, right? You still have to finish them. Anchor your understanding to this staggering statistic. Portugal's legendary veteran striker has managed 14 goal contributions in his last 14 international games. That's insane. They have the clinical edge required to convert those exceptionally difficult chances that pop up when you're playing against a tight, crowded penalty area.
Let's move along and see how this builds in Section 5, Knockout Stage Tactical Clashes.
So all of these theories get put to the ultimate test in the high-stakes environment of the knockout stages, where these contrasting styles violently clash. Let's look at a massive projected quarterfinal, France taking on Brazil. The tactical projection here actually favors France pretty heavily. In fact, the analysis suggests the only thing that could realistically stop France's overwhelming attacking wave in this matchup is their own physical fatigue following intensely demanding club seasons. Sure, Brazil has the historical pedigree, no doubt, but France has the sheer, unrelenting talent.
Then we have a monumental predicted semifinal clash, the nations of the two greatest players of this generation meeting in an official match. Yep, Portugal versus Argentina. Tactically, this is fascinating. The prediction sees Argentina recognizing Portugal's midfield threat and attempting to utilize a defensive low block to counter it. However, Portugal's sheer midfield mastery is projected to dominate possession, allowing them to patiently and successfully break right through Argentina's defensive shell.
And on the other side of the bracket, we have what is essentially the final before the final. Spain's historic unbeaten run crashing right into France's seemingly endless attacking depth. Now, when two elite offensive systems collide like this, the starting 11s often just cancel each other out. So the deciding factor here won't necessarily be the starters, it's going to be the tactical substitutions made late in the game.
And that brings us to Section 6, the ultimate champion predicted.
Which finally brings us to our resolution, derived directly from how these tactical structures hold up under maximum pressure. And the secret weapon? Well, it comes down to the concept of the super sub. Honestly, no one illustrates this better than France's Ryan Cherki. The source material highlights this unbelievable anecdote from a previous clash between France and Spain. Spain famously went up 4-0 in just 55 minutes. Then, Cherki came on for his French debut. He immediately scored, assisted, and set up another goal. It totally proves that having dynamic, deep attacking flair off the bench is the ultimate cure for tournament fatigue.
So here is the ultimate prediction for the final. France's endless attacking flair versus Portugal's elite midfield control. And the data-driven verdict? France takes the crown. The prediction has them overcoming Portugal's tactical balance purely because they possess the most ridiculously stacked squad on the planet. I mean, think about it. When legs get heavy in the 80th minute of a World Cup final, France can just pull world-class attackers off the bench who simply never tire. It's a real game changer.
Which leaves us with this final fascinating question to consider as we look toward this massive 48-team tournament. Does overwhelming attacking depth always outlast defensive pragmatism in the end? Can a perfectly structured defense ever truly withstand an endless, rotating supply of lead attackers across a brutal month-long tournament? Keep that in mind as you watch the matches unfold. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.